We're back. We've been exploring the events surrounding the deadly poison gas attack at Harford Mall in Bel Air, Maryland 10 days ago. With us again is Chief Doug Johnson, who was in charge of the emergency response elements on the scene. Chief, why did it take so long to determine what the nature of the problem was?
You have to understand, the initial calls were for a man having a possible heart attack. That was what we responded to. Now, perhaps if the EMTs had transmitted back the symptoms they were seeing at the food court right away, we might have picked up earlier that we were dealing with this nerve agent or at least some sort of organophosphate poisoning. But even after the EMTs went down, we didn't have information that would have indicated this was not something like carbon monoxide poisoning. It wasn't until Chief Belford's team went in that we suspected we were dealing with some sort of highly toxic environment.
Why did so many people die in this attack? The Tokyo incident involved thousands of people in a crowded subway, and 12 people died.
Well, that's a complicated issue. For one thing, the Tokyo attack involved very low-grade sarin, and the attack was poorly executed by the terrorists. Truth is, in both cases, we were somewhat lucky. The stuff is so deadly that if you changed any of a number of factors, we could have easily been dealing with dozens or even hundreds or thousands of deaths and victims.
We know it took hours to care for all the people at the mall. What special problems did you encounter, and how did you handle these problems?
Well, the sheer numbers of people caused problems. Every person at the mall had to be medically evaluated, decontaminated, and clothed. Once we suspected we were dealing with chemical nerve agent, we instructed everyone to strip to their underwear, and we performed what we call emergency decon by hosing everyone down with water.
We understand you encountered some problems with people cooperating, especially when they were instructed to remove their clothes. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, many people, especially women, were reluctant or refused to undress. This was particularly true for those people who were not in or near the food court and exited from other parts of the mall. These people had seen nothing, and many of them were exhibiting no symptoms at all. They had no idea what was going on and had no sense of immediate danger to themselves.
How did you handle that?
Yeah, we stressed the danger of vapors being embedded in their clothes, or that they may have stepped in or otherwise contacted the hazard. Those that still refused to undress were separated from the rest of the crowd to ensure they didn't pose an off-gassing hazard to everyone else. We then attempted to at least convince them to be hosed off with their clothes on.
Once people removed their clothes and were hosed down, how did you provide clothing or shelter for all of them?
As I'm sure you're aware, we had some problems initially. We didn't have on hand the resources to provide cover for that many people. Fortunately, it was a very warm day, so we didn't have any exposure concerns. I had my logistics officer coordinate with the Emergency Operations Center and local merchants to round up hundreds of blankets, sheets, and anything else we could get our hands on.
How did you manage to control everything that was going on? It must have been difficult.
It was extremely difficult. As soon as I knew the magnitude of what we were up against, I delegated responsibilities to my staff and sector chiefs. It was especially crucial to have someone responsible for logistics, as I indicated before, as well as staging of all the support elements, safety, and planning. I also knew there'd be a massive media response, so I requested a public information officer. Initially, the media was a problem, especially the camera crew that arrived at the scene almost as soon as I did. They were getting in the way, as they're apt to do, and I had to request police assistance to handle them. But eventually, the media proved to be very helpful in reducing public panic and by warning and educating the local public as to the limits of the danger. For a few days, public fear and paranoia were rampant, and it seemed that everybody in the county with a runny nose was showing up at area emergency rooms. This created a real problem for our hospitals, and just as the large number of victims created problems for responders, the number of response units involved created problems for me and my command staff. There was so much message traffic on the radios, it was hard to understand what was being said at times. As more and more units arrived, we ran into some space management problems too, especially near the food court entrance.
How important were the police in responding to this tragedy?
Absolutely huge. While the fire, EMS, and hazmat teams were dealing with the hazard and casualties, The police were busy cordoning off the entire area. They were quick to control those people leaving from all the other mall exits. Some slipped through, but by and large, the police rounded up most everyone. In addition, they secured the incident perimeter, set up traffic control of the road network, and provided security for the various response sectors and for me and my command post. In fact, we may have had a real problem if the police hadn't set up traffic control as quickly as they did. A charity fundraiser involving hundreds of motorcycle riders was scheduled to drive right past the mall in the middle of the incident. Of course, if the attack had been outside or if the agent had escaped the mall, we may have had a real problem since the local police didn't have respiratory protection and all the firefighters were busy caring for the victims.
We understand that a hospital in the area had to be shut down and that several local managed care facilities were exposed to the deadly poison. Why did this happen?
Well, as I said before, even though the police did a great job of containing the people that had been in the mall, some people did slip through. Some of these people went directly to the hospital or other facilities. We did notify the hospitals fairly quickly. The hospital shutdown was brief as they were able to determine that the individuals who arrived at the emergency room were not in the immediate vicinity of the food court and the agent on the floor. The hospitals then shut all their exits but one and controlled access and screened all arriving patients. Unfortunately, we didn't think about the private doctors or managed care facilities.
Is there still a danger to the public?
No. All traces of the agent have been removed, and the EPA, as well as other federal authorities, have brought in all their high-tech equipment and have been on the scene since the day it happened. They assure us that there's no longer any trace of agent present inside the mall or in the parking lots.
Chief, you used school buses to transport the large numbers of people to local hospitals. Are these school buses back transporting children to school? And if so, how do we know the children are in no danger?
Well, again, the experts have assured us that the buses are fine and the children are in no danger. However, we have been absolutely inundated with calls from concerned parents. If we had to do it all over again, we might look for other means to transport casualties instead of school buses.
Thank you, Chief Johnson. That concludes our coverage of this terrible incident. Thanks for joining us. For Connie Hathaway, I'm Rob Foster. Good evening.